This image is Andres, and it looks like I missed this when I was grading all the images, but your image has a couple of misspellings for the file name. It needs to be 235 instead of 253 for this class. That helps me stay organized, and it needs to be your last name then your first initial. So that also helps me stay organized as I'm going through and grading them. Oftentimes I'll just go through alphabetically and I could miss your image, especially if it has the wrong class number. All right, you're at ISO 400, 66 millimeters, f3.2 at 1/125th of a second. And those settings all look great. The image is a little bit on the dark side, but the areas that the light is hitting from this dappled light that's coming through a window, I'm guessing, are properly exposed. So I think this is a good exposure here. That f3.2 gives you a really narrow plane of focus. So if we look at this, her eyes are not quite as sharp as her hair is or her chin is. So I think you're just a little bit in front with the focus, and you miss the focus on the eyes, which is obviously a really big deal when we go to blow up portraits. So watch that focus, be really careful with it if you're using autofocus or manual focus, either one. There's different tricks to them, right? So if you're using autofocus, making sure you're setting your point of focus, and if you're using manual focus, you always want to focus a third of the way into the area that you want in focus. And there's different tricks to get like it perfectly sharp. So we can talk about that if you have questions. All right, so the exposure looks good. The light is unusual. It's not what we expect for an image like this. It's dappled lighting. It's kind of moving our attention in different areas, from her eye to the background to her shirt where the light is, even down here. So our eye moves to where that light is. And it's really interesting, and it makes it feel like more of an intimate image. This light isn't studio lighting. We know this is evening, warmer light that's coming through a window. We know that you're indoors and that this is probably personal space. So all of that's coming across just by the lighting. As I talk about in other images, the lighting can create a mood. Here is creating the intimacy. There's nothing around her that's telling us that this is someone that you're close to, or showing intimate space, or being on the same level as her, as we see with some of the kids, or photographing from above or below. But just by that lighting, you're creating that mood of intimacy. So I think that was a really smart move on your part. It really personalized this image. This image is by Jessica. We're in ISO 100, 42 millimeters, f9 at 1/250th of a second. All of those settings look good. We can tell by looking at this that the white balance is off, and that's an issue that I saw a lot in my other class as well. Remember, if you guys are shooting raw, you don't even need to shoot with a custom white balance or anything. You can just do all of that in post-production. And you're allowed to post-produce your images for this class, so that's no worries. Here we can tell that it's pretty blue, even if we just put our marker over the arm. You can see that the blue, I'm looking at these numbers right here, that blue is really heavy in this area compared to the red and the green. So we know this has a blue cast to it. So that's something that needs to be corrected for. And it's just probably that it was set for something else when you photographed. And there's a few images that we'll come across after this that have some technical issues. And I think it's a lot of this like shaking off the cobwebs from the summer. You had a few weeks off, you might not have had your camera, so we need to get right back into that routine. Overall, I think the exposure is good. If we were to adjust this white balance, I think that the exposure would be a little bit brighter, and that would be more of the exposure that we're looking for. The light that is on him is just natural outdoor light. It's afternoon. Yeah, 2:20 in the afternoon light. So it's pretty harsh light. You can see the shadow from his face on his arm and from his arm on his leg. So that's creating a harshness about this image that kind of matches what we're thinking of with this image. As he's working on a tractor, his hands are greasy. I wish we could see that cigarette in his hand a little bit more clearly, because I think that all adds to like the roughness of this image, and the light adds to that as well. communicating that this is someone that you are intimate with, that you have a close relationship with, is not as clear here. This looks like it's environmental portrait. There's nothing about this that's pulling us in and telling us that you have a relationship with this person. So maybe just not shooting him as he's working on the tractor, or if you guys work on things together, like having your things around might help with this. But thinking of how you can communicate, not just that this is someone that you're close to because you know that, but how you can communicate that within the image. And then this will be the last image here. This image is by Bridgette. You're at ISO 160, 30 millimeters, really wide angle. F14 at 1/100th of a second. So all those settings look good. You can open up your aperture a little bit more to allow the background to start to fall out of focus a little bit more. We don't need to see the car back here. We don't need to see the drain pipe coming down here. Like, none of that is adding to the portrait of your sister. So allowing that to fall further out of focus, I think, would work better. Also, changing your angle of view just slightly in this image, I think, would be helpful, because what we have right now is a lot of negative space behind her that's not being utilized, right? It's not adding anything to the image. And then on the front side, you crop into her foot a little bit. So by coming in tighter on the back, instead of having that unused space, it's okay if we crop into the blanket there. This is going to be a lot better image. And then having that space, that extra space, that inch that I just took off there on this side makes more sense. So just a little bit of a change as you approach this. I guess that's more than an inch. That's like 2 inches. The image is nice and sharp. The exposure is looking great here. It looks like you probably lined her face up a little bit and her hair so that the light, she's in the shadow, it looks like, but it doesn't feel like her face is in the shadow. So I think that was a good decision. The light that's on her, because she's in that open shade, she has hard light on her shirt and on her pants, but on her face you have that softer light. So that was her placement. Under the tree was a smart decision, that softer, more flattering light on her. And then what are you communicating? You're communicating information about her, right? She's reading the Michelle Obama book. We have a pile of books in front of her. This is what she likes to do. She likes to sit outside, enjoy the fresh air, and read. So that idea of who she is communicated here. This feels like more of an environmental portrait, same as what we saw with Jessica's image, more so than an intimate portrait. An intimate portrait would be you expressing your relationship with her in some way through this image. And you are a bit by getting lower and being on her level, but it still has more of an environmental feel than an intimate portrait feel. So that's something I want you to think about and work on how to communicate that in future images.